Good afternoon, everyone. Just putting up this video today because I think I should really be trying a different approach in giving people some sort of insight as to what is to be found on the second N.Z.E.F Roll of Honour. Now, as you know, this roll lists Army personnel, that includes war nurses, who have had links to Northland, and we won't go in this video. We won't go into just what I mean by links to Northland, but you'll find that sort of information elsewhere in the group and in earlier videos. But I did want, rather than just work you through the columns of the spreadsheet, and the roll is to be found on an Excel spreadsheet, what I really wanted to do was to put myself in the place of somebody perhaps questioning the creator of such a role, and perhaps recounting the sorts of questions that that person might have put to them. And so I guess a good way to start, so let's maybe just throw a few of these questions forward for you. Because I'm sure these would be the sorts of questions that people might ask, aside from the general one of, well, you know, what is it that I can expect to find up on the roll? And so what I'll probably do is I'll just sort of more or less work through the columns of the roll, but I won't actually just go out of my way to say, well, in column A there's this, in column B there's this, and so on. We'll stick to the questioning sort of format. And so here's a typical question I might be asked. So tell me, Dale, the people that are up on the roll here, these men and women, are they also on the Auckland Museum Cenotaph roll? Well, the short answer to that is yes. Essentially, every single one of these people should now feature on the Auckland War Museum Cenotaph roll, which of course is a commemorative roll for servicemen throughout the country. So a few years ago you would have found very, very few up there, but now, yes. So the short answer is yes, every one of the people that is on here should in fact be up on the Cenotaph roll, and I've gone through to check that, and you'll see that virtually everyone has got a Y against their name. Okay, next question. So this roll, you know, if I wanted to find out information, for example, of Maori servicemen and women, and say especially those who serve with the 28 Maori Battalion, is that information to be found fairly easily up here? Short answer again, yes. Not only will you know if a person served with 28 Maori, but you'll also know if they're to be found on the rolls of the 28 Maori Battalion website. Most are there. There are a few that are not. Okay, and so what I have done, in addition to, of course, recording the fact that they've served with 28 Maori, there has been a separate roll extrapolated, the 28 Maori Battalion roll. So you can see at a glimpse those who actually served with 28 Maori. And in fact, some of those people will be of particular interest to you because they were members of A Company, which is the Northland Company. Don't have all of those recorded as yet, only about half of them. But that's the sort of information you're going to get about the Maori Battalion. Now, okay, so Dale, you've spoken about these people being on the roll. Okay, as you know, quite a few women served in the Army, and were also nursing staff. Are they recorded on the roll? Short answer, yes, they are. And some of these women, their names are to be found on the rolls of the New Zealand Army Nursing Service website. A few are not. They haven't got everybody. So I have, again, extrapolated a separate roll from the main roll as well. And so you can see there who was in the New Zealand Army Nursing Service, who was in the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps, and those that are neither role. But we know that they served with, in most cases, it would have been either as a work or as a nurse. So, and that is a very interesting little website in itself too, and it's well worth a visit. So, yep, they're recorded on the main roll, but they're also extrapolated out onto a separate roll as well. Prisoners of war, we know that many service personnel, a good many guys, unfortunately, and Crete is a perfect example of this, where we had many guys that just ended up being captured, ended up in various camps in Europe, and information about these men can be gleaned from a number of sources. In my case, there is a listing, I guess you would call it, that was prepared for the Auckland Museum, the Auckland War Museum. And so I've managed to delve into that and get information from that, but also from papers past, because the problem with papers past, that will sort of record the fact that someone is missing an action belief taken prisoner of war, but we don't necessarily get a follow-up article showing that that situation has changed in any way. So I have actually recorded those people on the prisoner of war list, which again, another extrapolation. It's got a few tidbits of information on the prisoner of war list that you won't actually find on the main roll itself. So well worth taking a look at that, I think. Now, the obvious sorts of questions. So, you know, what are the sorts of things that set you going on this? I mean, you know, the initial data that you were working with, what was it? Where did that come from? Well, initially it actually came off the nominal rolls, or what we call the embarkation rolls. And I think there were 14 of these in all. So these were basically lists that were made up of those for each intake of every person that was, you know, this is as an enlistment, and subsequently of all those that went away with the different intakes. And there is certain basic information to be found on that roll. For example, obviously the person's surname, the person's Christian name. Now, occasionally an alias as well, but not normally on the rolls. Now, the problem is, like so many other records that you're dealing with, there are many errors in the nominal rolls, as I've subsequently discovered. In fact, there's errors in just about everything, and this is what makes the job of collating a roll such as this Freedom's Call roll so onerous, really, because it's hard going, and that will become more apparent to you as I get into a couple of other chats with you. So anyway, so you've got the surname, you've got the Christian name of the person, and you may perhaps have an alias at that point in time. You've got the person's service number, so you can always, and you can actually carry out a search on Cenotaph, for example, to see if a particular service number is recorded there if you can't pick them up by way of the surname search. The place where they enlisted, and there were various enlistment offices set up all throughout the country. So although a person may have had association to Northland, it's not to say, of course, that they necessarily enlisted in Northland. And indeed, many did enlist elsewhere. Their marital status at enlistment, as I said, it actually also, I think I've covered this just a minute ago, but I'll just repeat it again. The actual deployment that is also recorded. So, you know, if they went away with the lot between the beginning of January and 31st of March 1940, then that would be shown as well in the roll. So you can, at a glimpse, see which deployment they went with. And if you want to take that a little bit further, you could also go to the what I call the embarkation rolls, which again have been extrapolated from the main rolls. So at a glimpse, you can see, if you're wondering whether 2 or 3 individuals, maybe a couple of brothers, went off with the same deployment, you can soon see at a glimpse if that was the case or not. Last known address. So when a person comes in to enlist, their current address needs to be given. And next of kin. Now, next of kin are usually parents, sometimes wife. Occasionally you may find a sister or an aunt, or even an attorney, or even perhaps a good friend. But anyway, there is that information is also to be found on the nominal rolls. Now that is more or less where that stops. That's the sort of information that initially I was extracting. It really was confined to what was available on the nominal rolls, and didn't go any further. With the advent of things coming online, it was possible to start to expand out, to go beyond the Whangarei area, and again, I became extremely tempted to do the whole of Northland. I've pretty well done that, North Cape down to about Wellsford. So we're starting to look further afield now, and enter the Commonwealth War Graves Commission website and the New Zealand War Project site. Now here you can immediately go, and this information is usually to be found on the Cenotaph database as well, but here you can go to find out who didn't come back, or with a few that did come back who died shortly thereafter as a result of the injuries or a severe illness they sustained in the course of fighting overseas. So that's what you can find there. Now, so I decided, well, it's sensible, we're going to make that information available. So yes, you can get information about people that did not return, and the sort of information that you will find will be where they were killed or where they died, where they lie buried, if in fact they lie in a cemetery, and whether they appear, or if they're not, say, in a grave, where they may have been memorialised. And a reference number is usually given for that memorial, or a grave reference number. And those people, again, another list produced, the Lest We Forget list, which details only those who didn't return. It does also detail those on the what's called the Other Forces Roll of Honour, but I will not get into that today. Okay, so, well, all right, Dale. So this roll, it doesn't only deal with those who went away and didn't come back. It basically covers everybody with an association to Northland who went away to serve overseas. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct. So what other information could I find? Like, can I find out, where that person was born? Yes. When they were born? Yes. Where they died? Yes. When they died? Yes. Now, I say that with some reservations, and that information can come from a variety of sources. It may come from the likes of the birth and death indices, the information with regards spousal details, for example, might even come off a marriage index, but not necessarily so. And when we're starting to get into this sort of information, we have a variety of sources that we can turn to, including genealogical records and the like. But yes, there are columns set up to record date of birth and date of death, and I'm pleased to say in most instances that information is available. Now, it's not always guaranteed accurate. I can't make, as I said, a guarantee on anything. Even the information that's to be found on the BMD index, which is the official government index for births, deaths and marriages, cannot be guaranteed to be correct, as I have found out many a time. And certainly any genealogical records, you have to really take those more or less with a grain of salt, but in the hope that they do point you to the right person, and that's important in itself. Okay. So in the case of those who died, we can find out, can we, you know, whether they were buried or created? Is that possible? Yes. Most, not all, but most, we have actually been able to track down where they lie buried or whether they were cremated. And if there is if a photograph was taken of the gravestone and it was uploaded to a site like Find a Grave or A Billion Graves, or perhaps it may even be on the Cenotaph Index itself, or Cenotaph, or somewhere, you know, it could be any other website. But if there's a photo of that gravestone, that is, I also let you know about that. So yeah, that's interesting, and there are people who lie in graves all over the country, but who had that Northland association. And remember, a person can have an association to Northland, but still have an equally close association with some other province or some other town or what have you. Okay, what other information do we need to know here? Other details. Now we're getting into just, this is a mop-up column and it can get very, very complex. But you'll get the names of, you know, if you want to know who the parents were, hopefully you'll find them there, the name of the wife or partner. You may find other relatives listed as well. As I said to you before, their place of birth and death. Now, a lot of that type of information, as I say, has come from genealogical records, the likes of Ancestry.com, Ancestry Library, Genie.com, MyHeritage, etc. So, you know, many sources there. And some of that information is also to be found on the likes of Cenotaph or some of these other sites. If the person was a prisoner of war, that information is recorded there. If they received gallantry or long service medals or efficiency medals that were war associated, again, they will be recorded in that column, and there have been lists extrapolated also to reflect the honours that these men and women have received. Some of these medals and awards have been received post-war, but they do also encompass war service. Some of the awards that are listed on the main roll you will not find on the extrapolated roll. The extrapolated roll really focuses on those specific to war service. So, for example, if somebody got a CBE and that's recorded in the main roll, it may not necessarily feature. That person may not feature in the extrapolated roll at all. But there is, you know, there is pointers to bios where you can find a bio about that person, or maybe a video, or maybe a newspaper link. There's just there's a lot more information to be found there in that column as well. So as you can see, if you take one single line of data relating to a particular individual and you work through each single column, you can build up quite an interesting little profile of that person's war history. It won't be complete by any manner of means. It's not as if it's a service record or anything like that. But, you know, for all of that, it is a very, very valuable genealogical and historical research tool, and it's something that I hope Northlanders will avail themselves of for many, many years to come. It is unique. There is nothing, I tell you again, nothing like this roll in existence anywhere in the country. I mean, we're talking on that roll alone over 8,000 entries. So if you can imagine a spreadsheet, you 8,000 lines of data going down that spreadsheet and then about 40 odd columns across. That's what you're looking at just in that one roll alone. I'm not talking about the other rolls. There is one other roll that I would like to touch on, which, as I say, we'll talk about the other forces roll some other time, but I do want to talk about the familial roll, which is a recent construct. The thought did strike me that there was, just looking at the second N.Z.E.F roll alone, there was no easy way of immediately telling who in immediate family also served alongside of that person. So here am I, say for example, my uncle went off and served overseas, or an aunt or someone like that, Can I link that back and say, well, look, that uncle did, this uncle did, and my father did, and see at a glimpse just which members of the family actually did serve overseas, or indeed serve at all. The familiar roll will list those who also served in New Zealand, although I'm sure that information will be very incomplete, because there will be many people who would have served in New Zealand that we don't know about. And the reason we don't know about them is because they're not to be found on the Cenotaph roll or in any of the other records that I've come across to date. But there are a few. And I won't get into the colour coding and what that means in the familiar role at this stage. But if you could just imagine, okay, you've got a person, there's their name there, and then off to the side you've got the names of the brothers or the father or the wife or whatever that served, that also served. So at a glimpse you can just look at that line of data and say, well, gee whiz, look at that. This guy, he served, and his brother Bill and his sister Annie, they were over there as well. So it's a pretty powerful resource. But if you can imagine, if we were to just try and find out information on the second N.Z.E.F roll by itself, if you're looking at a name like Smith, for example, and you've got, maybe 100 or so, 150 names of Smith, you've got to basically scroll down through the whole lot to try, oh, wait on, okay, so and so, he's the brother of, oh yeah, he's brother of this one. It's a bit awkward. Here at a glimpse, bang, you've got everybody listed. And that includes those whose immediate family served with the other arms of the forces as well. By that I mean the Air Force and the Navy. So yeah, it's a pretty powerful tool for anybody wanting to get information about somebody. I've just noticed a while back that somebody put up a request for some information from me pertaining to that role, and I intend to answer that shortly. But I would just make the point, and I will put this underneath here. I will put the link to the website from which you can download the roles. I'll put that down below this video somewhere. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an overview as to what you're actually going to find on there. Now I'm going to have a very quick quiz at the, just one moment, at the roll to see if there's anything that I haven't really covered there. One of the things with prisoners of war that I didn't mention, there is a column that denotes where they were in fact captured. When we come to name variations, you can imagine a variation in name can mean anything. It can be simply how someone spells it, whether correctly or incorrectly. So you're getting various aliases and alternative names mentioned in that. Some of which are bona fide aliases, some are not, but they're to be found there. Rank, I didn't mention that the rank at the time that they embark on each embarkation is listed. What else do we have here? Their age, of course, is another thing, which I have, where I have found that a person was cremated, I have actually shown that fact, and also a date which either denotes when the cremation took place or when ashes were interred. So that's just some information that may be of interest to you. There's also a column for showing the funeral director, and I've only put that information in there because it can often be a useful starting point if you want to find out more about a person. You may want to know their last address, for example, before they died. And I have that information too, sometimes in the other details column. But sometimes the funeral director is a good starting point for getting that sort of information. There are columns that record whether the person is in fact on the birth and death index. So if there's an N in, say, the birth index column, you may find that any date of birth that is entered is a little less absolute. You may not be able to put quite as much emphasis on the veracity of that date of birth. But anyway, that's for you to decide. If there's a date of birth in there and it's not come off the birth index, it's come from some other source. In the case of parents, in the case of a mother, or in the case of a wife, I have shown the maiden name. Now, I appreciate that some of these men and women, they may not have married, they may have been living with a spouse. I have not made that differentiation at this stage, although I'm thinking to have a little bit of a play and try and improve on that a little further down the line. But you'll find other little notes. For example, here's someone I'm just reading, they're not on the cemetery records. Not noted service number on grave plaque shows as such and such. So there's a possible error there as far as the service number on the grave plaque. Last address, such and such address, Huntley. Cremated at the Hamilton Crematorium, something along that, served with the Long Range Desert Group. These are little tidbits of information that you are going to find when you also served in World War I. That's one that you'll come across from time to time. And some are a little bit nebulous. We don't have a definitive answer on them. For example, I've got one I'm looking at here, reading son of William and Charlotte Adams, husband of Aileen Maggie Adams, also believed to have married Georgina Joyce as per the marriage index. So, did he marry Georgina Joyce or not? Probably. Or is that someone else? Probably was him. It could have been a second marriage. If there is something to be found on the CWGC website, that's Commonwealth Graves website, that's noted. If there is a photo of the gravestone to be found anywhere else other than on the Find a Grave and Billion Graves websites, then that has been marked in red. Sometimes there is a disparity between what we see come up on, say, a birth record as compared with the mother's initials that were shown under next of kin in the nominal rolls. And I note that fact if that's the case. That's fairly common. There are variations in names. Sometimes a birth will record a name as such and such, a death will record it slightly different. Family will call that person a slightly different name. And when you're getting, particularly with regards to the likes of our Maori servicemen, then you can get into some interesting combinations of names arising there. So anyway, that gives you a little bit of a feel. I hope that's been of some value to you, and that I haven't burbled on too long. But a lot of information to be found here, and I hope you do put the role to good use in your further research. Thank you very much for watching.